You guys, I have got one of my favorites today. I'm sad that we have to do it on Zoom because we're so far apart, but she is phenomenal. If you have not or are not following Lindsey Paoli online, you really, really should be. She is a mind performance coach, but specifically, she's actually a psychotherapist. And her and I met, we were talking about this yesterday, years ago, actually in a yoga class. She came to one of my yoga classes and she said I dropped a nugget of wisdom. And she's like, this girl. I need to talk to her. And so we've kind of been friends and cross referral for clients and things like that back and forth. But she is somebody who works with a lot of high earning and high achieving people. And I think sometimes having an insight into the mental health world at that level, I think could be really, really helpful for a lot of you. So thank you so much, Lindsey, for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
I know we were talking yesterday and just riffing back and forth and it made me really, really excited for today's conversation. So
I know. Any combo we have is always just naturally goes in a million different directions that are all, I think, gonna be awesome for your audience.
yeah, yeah.
Let me hear we go.
Yeah, her and I are often like, okay, we need to wrap this up. Not that we don't have things to talk about. So there might be a part two, you guys. We're just prefacing now, but we'll see how it goes. But I would love to know. So she's worked with some really big companies, you guys. She worked with United Airlines. She's worked with Four Seasons. I mean, she's been in Forbes, Success Magazine. Like the level at which she is handling people and their mental health is really, I think, astounding. And one of the first things that I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about is because you work with people at this kind of higher level, so to speak, of managing people, managing businesses, managing money, things like that. Like, one, how did you transition from you did more traditional therapy for a
Yeah.
long time? Like, what was your transition like to work with these people?
So I actually always went into therapy with the intention of working with high performers. My story is that I got into therapy because I needed therapy myself. So before becoming a therapist, I was in hospitality, working on the Las Vegas Strip and really climbing the corporate ladder really quickly. So between the ages of like 21 and 30, I worked for Mirage and MGM Resorts. I helped open City Center. I worked for Win and Encore, and then I went to Cosmopolitan shortly after their opening. My specialty was always in operations and guest experience and really streamlining interdepartmental communication and making sure that the guest experience was the priority and we were being more preventable about having good experiences rather than negative experiences and minimizing those negative experiences as much as possible. It's a lot of fun, right? My intention was never to be in hospitality. It's just what you do when you live in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's like everybody you talk to has done some kind of hospitality work, whether they've been like a hostess at a restaurant or a server or something like that, or, a dealer. When I say dealer, I mean like card games, you guys. I want to clarify.
But the real love hospitality is
Yeah. And well, you need what you need, like, oh my gosh, that's funny.
And so I was doing that. It was a lot of fun. I've always been a real high performer. Quite frankly, my ability to be really good at things masks a lot of my inner turmoil. It's a coping mechanism that I have. Like if I'm struggling because I'm isolated or really anxious or really lonely, I'm really good at putting on a front and appearing very capable to everybody else is what I've now learned as a therapist. And so work in my day in the corporate world, but while I was climbing the ladder and in these really cool meetings, meeting executives and working directly with Steve Wynn's personal guests and having really cool hospitality experiences, I was not passionate about hospitality. I was struggling mentally. I was going to tons of really expensive trainings on how to take care of the client. But as a leader and a very young, new, fresh leader thrown into a really big city, there was no training on how to manage myself and my team. And that really stood out because the higher I climbed, I think the more I kind of sunk into this hole mentally myself. And so by the time I was 30, I was just fed up. I mean, my personal life was crumbling. Like I'd always wanted to have kids by the age of 25, which is crazy now that I look back on it. But my parents were very young parents. And I was instead married and divorced by 25. And so just everything that I thought I wanted to have in life wasn't at all where I had been going. And so struggling mentally with that and finding a therapist that understood both my ambition and the inner workings of what I was really good at hiding was a struggle for me. I would go to therapy offices and there'd be like crystals lined on the shelves and they'd be telling me to take deep breaths. And I was like, absolutely not. Because they're not going to work for
I don't
me.
have time for a deep breath.
I don't have time for deep breathing right now. I'm paying you a lot of money. We're not doing this. And so I actually found a therapist just by happenstance who was also an executive coach. And it was like, oh my God, you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
Mhm. And so I dropped everything and went to grad school with the intention of people like me need help. And at the time, this was right before COVID, so right before mental health really blew up. But I started recognizing, even in all of my peers, like we're all struggling with the same thing. We don't have the verbiage to know how to talk about it. This is something I did start offering within my industry. And then COVID happened, and then the great resignation happened. And so it went from me helping just individual one-on-one clients to being like, okay, this can be a corporate thing where the more that corporations understand that if they teach their people to take care of themselves and their people, the company has better value, better output. And so it all just kind of snowballed very quickly as soon as I graduated and started offering services.
And love that you said, like, I think so many times when things are going well in people's lives, that they still don't think that they don't understand why they don't feel fulfilled. And
Yeah.
it's almost like that constant chasing happiness. And you're doing it because you're like, I one, need money. Two, like, I want this certain lifestyle. And maybe if I kind of get more of this lifestyle, maybe if it's the husband, the kids, house, the car, then I'll be happy. And I know this goes all over the place. I'm not saying anything new. That
Yeah.
might make you happy. But I think to live it is very different. That you're
Mhm.
like, I should, on paper, I should, and I'm struggling with this. And I'm going to see therapists that can't speak that language because I don't want to get rid of, there's nothing wrong with having these goals. There's nothing
Right.
wrong with being a high achiever. And I think there's this, it's almost at odds with what I think society expects. It's like, when you were talking, I was thinking about people like Elon Musk.
Mhm.
He's said like several times, he's like, you don't want to be in my mind. It's like not a good place to be.
Yeah.
And like when you get to some of these like higher levels, he's not the only person. There's a couple of people that have kind of said things like that. Usually their brain and the way that they think and their mental health is, I think, just very different, whether they are something that's like on the spectrum or something like that,
Yeah.
undiagnosed or whatever it is. But like their brain actually functions differently. And that is sometimes hard to cope with as well.
Yeah. 100%. I would argue most business owners and leaders think very, very differently than employees. I always talk about with my clients the difference between an employee mindset and an owner mindset.
Yeah.
Nuts,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And there's
My husband
nothing
and I have
wrong
this.
with either, but
Yes.
they're just very different. And so it was very much like I was going to employee-based therapists because they're in an agency, they're employees themselves. They don't understand the pressures of being a 25-year-old, leader of a 4,000 room property on the Las Vegas Strip. They have no idea what, like,
Oh,
it's very different. And I would argue, like you're saying, that the mind of those types of people is very different. And you need somebody who understands and can continue to optimize that type of mindset in order to really continue to grow it because that's all they need. They need just some direction and a way to better harness or manage their energy
yeah.
uh, just differently.
Well, and I even noticed my husband and I basically have that conversation frequently because both of us have owned businesses with employees and different things like that. And you start to look at like, it becomes even like this, like you're like, okay, I need to hire. And I'm like, it's hard to hire when I'm like, I can do it faster and sometimes better than you and do all these other things. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with either mindset, but typically, or the way that the brain works. But if you're looking at the way that your brain works and you think that something is like wrong with either other people because they don't do it as fast as you do, or there's something wrong with you because your brain work, you're like, I'm different. And
Yeah.
that like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I personally I think there's a lot more testing that we can do now, but I
Yeah.
actually don't think there is a normal like brain when we
Yeah.
talk about people being on this, like the diversity of the spectrum that they're now able to diagnose, and like
Yeah.
the specificity, and even the, looking at a brain and you're thinking it's neurodivergent. I think there are elements of that within everybody. And I think that's
Yeah.
more of like how the brain is shaped growing up and in the response to the environment, and like environmental toxin exposure and all of those things change then the way that the brain interprets things. And so that
Yeah.
changes your long-term like coping and things like that. But
Yeah, I would also argue that most of my clients have some form of neurodiversity. And I mean, I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm a dual licensed therapist. I don't offer therapy. I don't fit into the therapeutics model. I don't like diagnosing people because I totally agree that there's not necessarily a normative, and the more we slap labels on the intricacies of the ways that the mind can work
yeah,
instead of finding the ways to make all of those little things work for you, it becomes problematic. And we end up in this medical based model that mental health is, where pharmaceuticals is the end game rather than growth and change and evolution. But I've noticed, even as somebody who was diagnosed late, as a 35-year-old woman, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And so I always see, so entrepreneurs and business owners ADHDers are 300% more likely to become entrepreneurs, because of the way that their brain works. And there's so many different strengths that apply towards creating something new in the world, and that don't allow them to be very good employees. And
yeah.
so it does really go into the neurodiverse versus the neurotypical or neuronormative mindset that owners and leaders tend to be somewhere on that spectrum of different thinking than being the normal. But again, it is such a spectrum, and it's all just strengths and weaknesses that the more you understand about your unique strengths and weaknesses, the more you're able to hone in on them.
Yeah. The Even like, I'm thinking that not only does this apply to like employee, owner, or entrepreneur dynamic, but I think this often even applies in friendships too. I don't know if you've noticed this, but as somebody who's owned their own business since they were 24 years old, so most of my adult life, I've owned my own business or worked for myself. It becomes difficult to tell people like, hey, these are some of my ideas. And they're like, well, why don't you just do this? And you're like, because that would cap my income, my creativity. Why the fuck would I want to do that? Like,
Yeah.
and they don't understand because they're kind of like you were talking about. You're like, okay, I'm going to these therapists that are referred to me by insurance companies, by an
Right.
agency, whatever. It's like those people are fed to you. You don't have to go out and pedal to find your people.
Yeah, you have no idea how to actually market, build a business, create social proof, all of the things that are charge appropriately, collect billing. All of that is essentially handled for you.
And it really like, I think then you go to talk about Matt and I, when we first met, one of the things that really drew him to me was that he's like, I love that you own your own business. He's like, because one piece of advice that I was given after I had like a breakup, I was talking to a friend and both of us owned our own business. And she said, Matt, all the timers cannot date 9-to-5ers. They don't understand that, like, as somebody who's like a leader of something, that they don't just go home and now they're like, and I'm off.
Yeah.
I don't think about it again. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, I'm going to bed. And if an idea hits, sometimes like I need to get up and I need to write it down and I need to like, outline it a little bit because it's going to be gone in the morning. I promise you.
I always say that too. And it's never as good the second time you try to recraft it, right? Like, it has to be in the moment. I love that term, all the timers. That's perfect for the business owner mindset. And I'm also married to an entrepreneur. Like, he owns a business, but we didn't start that way. When I first met him, actually, he was a casino host he was a whale hunter in casinos. And so he was only working with million-dollar spend players and more. So these were celebrities, business owners. It was another indication to me that, like, these people that, like, it was my first introduction to massive wealth, right?
Mhm.
And granted, a lot of these really wealthy players had a gambling addiction, right? Like, they had their own mental health issue.
Yeah. You
But
know, give him my card.
no, it made me very aware, like, this isn't even just in, like, my mid-level, like, management position where I feel overly ambitious to go to a therapist. Like, these people also need therapists. Where is this, like, billionaire gonna go to talk about his inability to stop gambling on the
With
weekend, you know? Like, I
Yeah,
have
with
to be
somebody who doesn't
relatable.
understand what moving $1 million or
Right.
more is
Yeah.
like mentally, emotionally, like, it's similar and it's again, it's like all relational to your experience. So, like,
Yeah.
for him, moving $1 million might be $100 to somebody else
Right.
emotionally, but it's still like if he goes to somebody who's charging $70 an hour for therapy, they don't
Yeah.
get the level of, like, I think the level of influence or the level of change that
Right.
amount of money makes,
Right.
so it's hard to relate.
Yeah. When I was in grad school and I said I was going to in my not student internship, but like my postgraduate internship, I was gonna charge $85 an hour, and I was not gonna accept insurance, and people thought I was crazy. Like, my supervisors were like, "Good luck getting $85 an hour," and I was like, "I wouldn't be taken seriously if I was charging the $30 an hour you wanna pay me in your agency." And now I charge 250, and people, like, balk at that, but it's 100% exactly like you said. If I'm not charging that, then these people are at a different level of money and it flows differently. It's seen differently. It's all a very different world.
Yeah, and even, like, I think this is also part of the reason why we talk about kind of getting in rooms with I was interviewing somebody the other day, we were kinda talking about basically kinda getting in rooms where you're, like, with people who are at similar levels as you, either in business or kind of doing what you want to do and having this exposure. And I call it benchmarking, but it's like if you have something that you want for your life that you don't have yet, but you know it's out there because you see other people have it, right? Or other people are doing it or experiencing it, whether it be a feeling or whatever. So, because it might be love and that's hard to like tangible, except for like
Yeah.
the person. If you don't know who the person is yet, you're like, okay, well, I want to feel this way and have this experience. Who else is kind of doing that? And I was like, even if you don't know them personally, like start to surround yourself with whatever they're doing. So if they put out like this, if they put out a podcast, if they offer courses, if they have like a mentorship or something like that, like putting yourself in more rooms where there's people that are operating either at the level that you want to or things like that. Cause like you're talking about when you talk about the mentality and the way that people's minds work, it changes as they're experiencing different levels of wealth, different levels of, let's say, like spirituality, different levels of business. Somebody who has no employees and somebody who runs 100 employees are going to run their businesses very different based on that.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that there's like so much money mindset that goes into this. So if you're listening and this all feels ridiculous, talking about $1 million spend players, like this all felt ridiculous to me at the beginning too. When you were saying like I've worked with 4 seasons, that still feel insane to me. Like, this is not the lifestyle that I was born into. I'm a military brat who was raised by, 19 and they had me my parents had me at 19 and 20, and my dad was enlisted in the Air Force and, like, just trying to make ends meet while I was growing up. So, having been pushed into the lifestyle that Las Vegas kind of introduces you to, and then being surrounded with the people that my husband was around, all of this was, like, a constant money mindset evolution. And so, like we were saying, if you don't understand what it feels like to move millions of dollars, you can't work with those people. Like, I still don't know what it feels like to move millions of dollars, but I'm certainly very familiar and comfortable with people who do. And one way that I really started forcing myself to do that was to go and work in places that made me feel uncomfortable. Like, I would go to Crystals and all of my money fears would come up and I would be like
Yeah,
uncomfortable or
Crystals is like a very, very high-end shopping area in Las Vegas.
yeah. And then I would go to I don't know. After I stopped working at Win, I'd go work on my own business, just like do my content and just hang out there and just see how people who are living with that type of money or wealth or success, like how they operate, how they move. We talked yesterday a lot about matching frequency. And so, like, you just feel the energy of those people. And then you kind of like are able to emulate it. And then you start attracting it more. And so, I really attribute my ability to now pitch these companies that it still feels crazy to hear about from like little me to a lot of that accidental frequency work that I was doing.
Yeah. You're like, I didn't know I was benchmarking, but I was doing it. But that's the thing is, I think that's a huge difference is you're like, I don't have to be a millionaire to understand or be, again, playing with thousands of dollars at a poker table or millions of dollars at a poker table to know how, what it feels like to be around that kind of spend or to be around that operating at that kind of level because you're like, I continuously put myself in those environments where that was normalized. And what are some of the things that when you talk about money mindset and you're like growth of like, I came from just getting by to now I'm in this circle where people circulate millions of dollars. Like, what are some of the mindset things that came up for you?
So much. Me and my husband would fight all the time. And I'd be like, I don't belong here. I don't know what to wear. Like, I don't have the fancy handbags, or it was always like, I don't fit in. I don't belong.
Oh,
Which is also my recurring limiting beliefs as a military child anytime because we moved a lot. And so the that's the recurring thing for me is I don't fit in, I don't belong. And so it just happens to then manifest in these money situations too. But then I would start to realize like I'm having these conversations with these people. They're no different than me. We think exactly the same. There's just things that they do differently. Like there's just little tweaks where they think about things differently.
yeah.
Spending money on health was something that was really a big hurdle for me when we first started our businesses and started needing support. So whether it was hiring in my business, just like you said, like I can just do it myself. Why would I pay somebody else to do it? Hiring like a nanny or hiring a cleaning person was a big mindset shift for me where I'm like, I'm not the type of person who can afford these, that to me feels like a very wealthy person thing. Sending my kids to Catholic school, a private school, like that felt like I just was not that person. And then I realized those people are not any different.
Yeah.
It just suddenly you like get over this hurdle and you're like, oh, like I'm just kind of stuck in this like egocentric spiral and nobody is paying as much attention to me as I'm thinking that they are. And they're also all trying just as hard.
Yes.
And regardless of their level, it's wild.
And that's kind I mean, we talked about there being like differences in the way that people think, but I think the more important point that you're making is that there's actually so many similarities. Like
Yes.
we think like they do all these other things or they have it so much easier because of A, B, and C. And it's like, I always tell everybody, can you imagine being somebody that owns a business that is responsible for giving 100 people their ability to buy food and have housing for their families? They have a lot of responsibility that you don't have having no employees or not having to pay for like a physical brick and mortar that they're paying for. Like all of these other buying equipment, providing health insurance. So it's different in the sense that you have to handle maybe a different level of pressure or a different level of responsibility. Like you have to be able to regulate better and more efficiently and adapt, I think, at that level. But you still feel the same things. You still feel intimidated sometimes. You still feel scared. You still feel anxious. All of those are human emotions that everybody experiences.
You still feel resentful of people not considering your experience. All of the things that, like what you're describing, I hear a lot from, I do like teen trainings. And so I hear a lot from employees, like they're not considering, how this communication pattern affects us or all of this stuff. And you say things like, I know, because they're considering how to make sure that everybody keeps their job through this current recession. And like, So there's different levels of responsibility here. We need you guys to fix this here because it can't be their responsibility. They have bigger problems that you're not giving them credit for. And I see that a lot of times in the companies that I work with where they're starting to have like a cultural like disintegration. And it's a very like point the finger blame. And usually it's really easy to point the finger at the people making more money without considering how not all business owners are making more money than their employees. A lot of business
100%.
owners are not making money in order to
Pay the
be
employees.
and yeah. And I came from being an employee to an owner and then learning all this as the therapist to these owners. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You know? So,
Well,
yeah.
because you're like, something's got to give. And if it means keeping my business afloat, and again, these people keeping employees and making sure
Yeah.
that these 100 people are able to feed their families, if that means I take a little less. And that's, again, that's not everybody. Because I think so many times they see people like Jeff Bezos and, all these people that they're making so much money. And they're like, see, they don't think about anybody. And I was like,
Yeah.
those are select few.
And that's not where they started.
No.
Like,
And
everybody's
it's like,
their evolution. Yeah.
and it's just different levels of responsibility. I kind of think of a business kind of like a family unit. Like
Mhm.
you need more than one person to do everything. Like I can't do all the grocery shopping, do all the cooking, do all the cleaning, also
Yeah.
run my own business, also take the kids everywhere, also make sure the dogs and animals have all of their needs met and the
Yeah.
walking and it's like it's too much for one person. And so the kid who's responsible for doing the dishes can be irritated at the parent for telling them to do the dishes. And they're like, yes, but this gave me an hour to work so I could make an extra $250 to pay for your soccer or whatever that you're doing. So
Yeah.
it's like everybody contributes just in different ways, I think, in a business, but there's different levels of where that responsibility lies. But ultimately, everybody feels pressures and everybody feels, frustrations and also joy and gratitude and all those things for business, for their jobs and stuff like that too. But it's
Yeah.
never just cut and dry.
But everybody also needs to be contributing, right? And considering the big picture. And so, yeah, when I work with a lot of companies, it's interesting because I'm trained as a marriage and family therapist, which is we consider the system of the family and the dynamics. And like usually, if you think traditional therapy, like a parent will or their parents will bring in a child because they're the problem child. But in fact, the problem child is just a reflection of something going wrong in the hierarchy, whether it's like the older sibling or the parents. And so when I was still a student doing marriage and family therapy, I would never accept just the child. I would insist on working with the entire family because you have to change the dynamics of the whole family. And so now I've translated essentially that to the workplace because as much as I don't like saying a business is like a family, because your business should not be your family, it still operates very similarly, like you just explained,
The
where
dynamics.
the system has to operate effectively. And typically the problem child or problem department is not the problem. They're just the best reflectors of the problem. And so you've got to consider all of the working departments and how to get them working together.
Yeah. So for those of you, I feel like I have a lot of people who are business owners and things like that. So I really hope that you're like hearing this conversation. And if you haven't hired yet, or you're thinking about it, or you're just kind of looking at sometimes maybe you are working for somebody else and like sometimes there's that resentment and stuff like that. I hope you're like hearing kind of what she's saying of like sometimes it's again, like it almost takes like zooming out
Yeah.
and being like, okay, what is the actual problem and how can we address these things at the many level in the chain that it's happening? Because it's like it's just the loudest wheel. It's not necessarily the problem. It's just the loudest.
Yeah. And without self-reflection and self-accountability from all of the players, it'll never get fixed too, which is frustrating.
Yeah.
From when you're inside it.
Yeah. Well, and what a ripple down effect that has, that when you address things like, again, your mental health, when you are a leader and the way in which you live your life, how that actually ripples down. So fun fact, this is kind of like a little bit of a transition to something I want to talk about. So Lindsey and I touched on that we met in a yoga class and she had kind of mentioned like I went to some therapists and they had some crystals out and she's like, fuck this, no. But
It's come a long way. I've come
yeah, like, yeah, we talk quite a bit now about like spirituality and there being kind of something greater than yourself and energy work and all of this stuff. And so, in that, I'm curious what do you think about if leadership had more spiritual practices or rituals
Mhm.
that kind of kept them more in tune, or if that was more of a norm in more conventional business? And what do you think some of the trickle down would be?
100. Okay, so this is literally also the mission of my business. The entire mission of my business is that the mental health industry is focused on solving problems once they're already existing, right? And so my belief as an ADHD out of the box crazy thinker, like some of us are, is like our whole system is wrong. Why are we focused on the problem instead of how the problem arose? And I think a lot of the problem came from the industrial complex and creating this whole leadership and employee mind and
Power
having really
dynamic.
poor, yeah, really poor leaders in place who don't have empathy, compassion, don't care, are focused on making money, taking advantage of people. And I think we still see that to some degree in a lot of companies today. And so people who are just doing the best that they can and trying to make ends meet are sacrificing their boundaries in order to make a paycheck and take care of things. And then they start suffering with the stressors that they're under and have mental health issues. And so my belief as I was going through grad school is like, couldn't we make such a bigger impact on the issues that we're seeing in our mental health today by focusing solely on leaders who are not going to therapy because therapy doesn't feel approachable or acceptable to them, and letting them influence and trickle down with positive influence rather than the negative perception that people see leaders as having. And so that's been my whole mission and drive. And I 100% agree that there's so many different practices and mindset shifts and spirituality that could be integrated into CEOs and then their C suites and letting it trickle down. And I do see that being done a lot in the last like 5 years where they're like, oh my gosh, we really need a breathwork session, or we really need a sound bath for our wellness retreat, right?
Yeah.
And they do it almost as like, okay, we took care of you, now go grind harder, right? Instead of it being an actual consistent practice that shifts the culture of the company. It's like, I gave you a sound bath, you're all calm now, let's, grind harder until next year.
Yeah, and which kind of brings me like it's part of the reason why I love that you set up the what she calls the mind fundamentals. And I think if people implemented something like that from the leadership position down and it was infiltrated into all parts of the business, it would lead to a much happier overall experience in, again, that dynamic of leader and employee. But also I think it would make just business culture so much better mentally for so many people. Can you tell us a little bit about your mind mental fundamentals?
Yes. So actually, I came up with the mind fundamentals in reflection during grad school about like what went wrong with me that led me to want to leave and that led me to the worst mental health of my life. And it wasn't the big thing. Like in part, it was okay, I wasn't where I wanted to be in life. I wasn't going the direction that I wanted. But more so, it was all of the daily practices that I realized in grad school, like your brain is a really simple organ. It requires some basic things in order to operate effectively. Essentially, it's just an automation machine and it's going to automate things that you do consistently to make it easier for you. And so for me, it was automating a lot of negative thoughts instead of positive thoughts, but also really negative habits that I think most of my peers, we were all practicing and suffering in our own ways. And so the Mind Fundamentals is an acronym for mindful. So movement, intention, nourishment, deep connections, fresh air, unplugging, and learning. And if you're doing those 7 things each day in even the tiniest increment and paying attention to it, not only do you become more attuned to your body, your brain is operating and nourished appropriately to create baseline levels of serotonin and other well-being neurotransmitters. your neuroplasticity is better primed for allowing your experiences to feel like they're changing and that they're positive. All of these things just fall in line with just getting some exercise each day, going outside. I was working in a casino. You don't even see outside. You don't even know what time it is.
And they did that on purpose.
Yeah, and it's intentional. They're doing it on purpose.
They know you'll get sucked right in.
To keep time.
Work more / gamble more. Like, that's the intent.
Yeah. And so those little things that I was missing, I realized like, oh, I've created this entire set of bad habits to survive with my career and my life. And they're all the wrong thing to improve mental health. And then I became a therapist and realized, we're talking about all these medications and as a therapist, you have to diagnose in the first session. So you have one session to meet somebody and spend 45 minutes to an hour, depending on your assessment process, to understand what's wrong with them and then tell the insurance what you are going to bill for. And they're going to tell you how many sessions you get based on that 45-minute meeting. And there's no time.
Wild.
Yeah, it is nuts. It's stupid. It's silly. There's no time in there to be like, what are your lifestyle practices like? How much sleep are you getting? What does your diet look like? What do your friendships look like? These assessments are typically in that assessment process, but these could be simple shifts that don't require a diagnosis of anxiety or depression that people can make like that. But it's just the system has not been structured to consider that those simple things can make positive change. And I now teach it in corporations, and it does. And the companies who adopt it and actually start making tiny shifts, like offering healthier vending machines, like the tiniest little thing, they start seeing progress in their employees, allowing their employees to go outdoors during breaks, forcing breaks, making sure their breaks and take their lunch breaks, etc. Those little things really add up in a company culture.
Yeah. When I think of company culture, back when I was doing eyelash extensions, I had one of my clients worked for Zappos, and she worked very early years and knew Tony very personally. And so was really, really cool to hear about her experience and his focus on creating good work culture. And nobody wanted to leave. Not to say, I'm sure people left like that, but it was like your desk was like your area to organize however you want, to decorate however you want. There was no like, it just couldn't encroach on other people, and it couldn't like encroach in your ability to do work. Other than that, I can't remember exactly, but I want to say there was like little to no dress code.
Yeah.
People could wear what they wanted to work, especially if they weren't front facing. A lot of their stuff is behind the scenes because they were an online thing. There was a kitchen and restaurant, like they had great food. They were encouraged to do things outside of work. Like a lot of them would meet up with Tony and like ride bikes downtown with him. And she's like, I loved working there. In fact, I feel like over time, I want to say her sister ended up working there and several other people. Like, she's like, yeah, because I enjoy, even if and that's, I think the biggest difference is people don't understand is that if you have purpose, and if you have the ability to create or use your creative energy in some way, when you give people these things and these small things, like requiring them to leave at 5 o'clock, you cannot stay.
Yeah, get out of
Work
here.
will be there tomorrow. Like you value the person over the product or the profit. And so then all of a sudden the person is more than willing to do things because they have a better quality of life. And I'm like, how do big companies not understand this, that if you valued your people and created good quality life experiences for them outside of work, that you would have much better employees?
Yeah, 100%. It's something I saw too firsthand. I mean, there's always like pros and cons to it, but working at Win was one of the craziest cultures that I've been in because it was genuinely one of the healthiest. It was very opposite from Zappos, but he very much valued his employees. And so there were a lot of tiny little things that he did that now I look back and instead of being an employee and being in the work that I do now, that I'm like, oh, he really did a lot of things right. But just like Tony Hsieh, Steve Wynn has had a ton of criticism and do. I mean, it do. Tough work what he went down for, I'm sure. But Tony Hsieh had a lot of criticism too. A lot of people criticize the culture that he created too. But
Yeah.
we talked yesterday about you find your people and you should polarize the people that don't belong. As a business owner, your ability to find your people, grow your people, and do it with your understanding of them makes your company so much more profitable in the long run. You had mentioned earlier the hesitancy to hire somebody, and it made me think of I always tell my clients it takes time to make time. It takes time to grow your people. It takes time to get somebody caught up with your level of experience in order to let them go off and save you the time that you hired them to save, right?
Yeah.
And the same applies with corporations. It doesn't happen immediately that you implement these changes, but the more you take the time to start making these small shifts, then it builds a more consistent company with less turnover, fewer call out when you are actually getting to know your employees and taking care of them in a way that feel meaningful to them.
Yeah, and it's even when we talk about, and we've kind of talked about this outside of this conversation, obviously, but like how sometimes that means like pivoting or changing things, especially if you're owning your own business. Like, I think sometimes it's like understanding that what's working now only works for so long sometimes. And so sometimes that either means you changing things in your business model to work better. And sometimes this means releasing responsibility to other people, like hiring people and then letting them do their job. And sometimes it actually means like changing what you're doing within your business because it's not working. Like we're so focused on doing business sometimes a certain way or the way that we've been taught that different seasons of life sometimes call for different things. And we were kind of talking about this yesterday of how your seasons of life have changed. And so, like, especially as somebody who's concerned about mental health and that's your career,
Yeah.
and you've seen it kind of at all levels. What are some of the kind of tall tale signs for you, at least, that you see in other people or that you notice in yourself that you're like, okay, I need to make some changes? Like, what starts to happen that you feel like is where things start to break down so that other people can maybe notice these things too if it's happening to them?
Yeah. Yes, I am definitely in a phase personally right now. And so I'm glad that you bring this up because despite having built where I am now, I'm very much considering how to adjust this to have some more free time now that we've moved to Florida to spend with my kids and really get to know the community. I was in Vegas for 20 years, and so it was a lot easier to market and build business there. And here I want to be more focused on community and creating my circle before focusing on my business. And it's always the same things that show up for me personally, and it are typically what my clients end up starting to call me for is at first you start getting sick
Uh-huh.
frequently, and you're like, "This is
Uh-huh.
so weird. I don't ever get sick." And then you notice like it's a cold and a flu, but like coincidentally, it's only on the weekends. It's never going to
Yeah, when
impact.
you have downtime.
Yeah, you just have the time to be sick, right?
Mhm.
Um, you start getting a little bit more snappy or just kind of like in shutdown mode where by the end of the day, you just kind of hit a wall and their ability to maybe connect with your family or make dinner or transition from work to home life feels impossible. And then you kind of are like sinking into guilt of then you're like, oh, well, I shouldn't be a working mom or a working dad because, now I'm taking away from this family time, but you just feel like you're kind of like exhausted all the time. You'll start noticing either that you like withdraw from your friendships or that somehow there's been an implosion in either friendships or your relationship. And it's usually like it feels like it's something so silly, but it's likely something that has been kind of brewing under the surface. And now you just don't have the capacity to stuff it down anymore.
Yeah.
So starting to notice more frequent arguments or bigger arguments because you just don't have the level of give a fucks to keep the peace anymore. And that's also something that like I teach my clients is I want you arguing more so we don't ever get to this point again. But it's typically what they end up coming for is like I just had this big blow up argument with my husband. It feels like it came out of nowhere. And now, we're like, do we even belong together? And that's rarely, sometimes it's the case that they end up splitting. but it's usually just that there's so many things that are weighing on the person that they're not able to navigate or manage anymore. So basically, all the symptoms of burnout are usually what people come to me for or notice in some capacity. And burnout, I think, has become a buzzword, and people assume that it's bigger than it is. Burnout is simply when your ability to cope or your tools for coping are not as big as your demands throughout the day. So you just feel like you don't have the capacity to keep reaching that next level. Or that's something people come to me for too. Is like, I feel like I'm trying my hardest every single day and I'm on this same hamster wheel. I haven't increased business or I haven't created more time with my family. Like I feel like I'm getting nowhere and I'm working so freaking hard to get there.
Yeah, well, and how important it is, like you're saying, like to pay attention. If I have a couple of friends where I'm like, every time they have a day off, they're sick, or as soon as they
Yeah.
get back from vacation, they get sick.
Yep.
Guys, this is a cue that your body is at capacity
Yeah.
and something needs to give. Like,
Your
if
nervous
it's
system
happening,
is shot.
yes. Well, and that's the thing is, this is basically how, like in my work, where we're looking at nervous system regulation, because if your nervous system is dysregulated, that is a precursor for your immune system to drop. So when your nervous system is constantly dysregulated because it's in the sympathetic drive all the time, always in fight or flight, when you have these moments where it can come down, it almost is like dropping too far, and the
Yeah.
immune system is already taxed because it's trying to keep up with the demands. So now you have space where it's like, okay, finally. And so it's already tanked. And so you get sick.
Yeah.
It's like,
Because your body is like, all I need is rest and some space and
yeah,
some ability to be. And that's also a big part of what the mind fundamentals taught me because I created them because I needed them.
yeah,
The best ideas or direction to go come from not doing anything, not going to a class, not going to a professional. Sometimes it's just being outside and being alone with your thoughts. And I think that we are so wired for being successful and being achievers that the ability to just be and be connected with our bodies has been taken away. Hackers have made it a game. Like we've gamified mindfulness, and you can't
yeah,
gamify mindfulness. That
yeah,
defeats the entire purpose of mindfulness and presence, you know?
yeah. I was talking to somebody on a podcast the other day and we were talking about, I was like, she was talking about like her morning routine. She's like, you can do all these things, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, essentially, if your morning routine takes you all the way till the night, it's no longer something that's keeping you healthy. It's a hobby. It's taking up your time. And if it's something that you enjoy and you think you're curious and stuff like that, but it takes away, if you're just checking things off to say, this makes me mindful, you're no longer mindful.
Yeah.
Like, I started the habit when I went through my first yoga teacher training. I had to meditate. I had never meditated in my life. And all of a sudden I had to sit down for 30 minutes. You guys, 30 minutes is really long when you can.
Yeah. Tap in at like 5 to 7.
Oh my gosh. I was like, okay. My back would hurt because I didn't know like cross-legged was not for me. I need to sit kind of like side saddle like type of thing.
Oh, yeah.
That helps keep the S curve in my back. It's actually a lot more comfortable for most people unless they have knee issues. But
Like
I
the
digress.
cheerleading chair? Like this?
Yes, yeah. So I sit on
I'm
a
just saying
cushion
like that, right?
and then put both my feet like that, and I can sit for, I did an all-day sit like that.
Oh my God.
But the cross-legged, because one hip will always be higher, and unless you're super flexible, it takes a bit of the S curve out of the bottom part of your back, like your lumbar spine. So that tucked under often feels like the pull between the shoulders and stuff like that. But yeah, try it, everybody. But
Do you see me micro adjusting? I'm like, wait.
But I started to see how my mind was working. And I feel like I don't have necessarily a diagnosis of ADD or ADHD at all, but the level at which my brain functions and the things that my ability to, you tell me one time, you show me one time, I've been like, I can replicate it, no problem. I typically don't need maps if I've been there one time. I can rebuild something if I watch how you take it apart. I can take something really quick and kind of make it better. It's just really, really efficient. And I noticed that exercise helped me be more clear-headed. And I was like, oh, these are some of these things where I'm like, again, I don't feel like I need a diagnosis, but I've figured out the things that make me feel more clear-headed. And so when I would sit in meditation, it gave the space for the things that I was suppressing to kind of come forward. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So when you're doing all these habits that you think are mindful, but don't actually make you aware of your mind, it kind of defeats the purpose.
Right.
So I started being like, okay, I want to sit for at least 5 minutes. And my intent is to focus on my breath for 5 minutes. I'm going to stop trying to make it this long thing and make it more of a consistent thing. And it's really changed how I am able to actually be more mindful throughout my day. Instead of being like, I have to sit for 30 minutes no matter what. It was like just 5 minutes of focusing on your breath. If you can do it for 5 minutes and you want to sit longer, great. But it stopped being this thing where it was like, and so now I honestly feel weird if I start the day without sitting for at least 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And because it brings me that like level of clearness and like presence that was really hard to find when I was just trying to do things.
Yeah.
And so it is funny how sometimes we take a really good intent and we're like, and give me a guiding this, and that'll make it better. And so it's like,
and you're suspended, and I'm reflecting, thinking like, these people are saying, bitch, you just told me to do 7 things. How are you going to tell me that that's
but these are simple. That's why I love them.
Tiniest level. Like, I don't be CrossFit every day to hit your movement. Oftentimes, what I tell clients is, you're moving constantly through the day. They're usually walking the property, which is a lot of walking, right?
Yeah.
They're meeting their other leaders, etc. And so the mindfulness of that movement is, you don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to be training for a triathlon in order to mark movement off your mindfulness productivity. It's that you're paying attention as you're moving to, oh, I'm moving right now. This isn't just me attacking this list. This is like, how does this feel in my body? And I get like really into the nitty gritty of it, like different movement applies to your mind differently. So walking or any sort of bilateral stimulation that's going to tap both hemispheres of your brain is great for problem solving, which is why whenever you're fighting, what do you want to do? You want to walk away, take some time to kind of like come up with a solution. And then, with my clients, I get into the nitty gritty of the ways to be as mindful as possible and use the smallest portion of that mind fundamental that's appropriate for what you need that day in order to be consistent and sustain this practice, because you're going to have to sustain baseline level of brain function if you're going to do anything to the highest level,
Agreed. It's like, it's really, really simple. Repeat those again, what they stand for again.
Movement, intention, nourishment, deep connections, fresh air, unplugging, and learning.
Great. I love it. You guys, I hope you wrote all of those down. But that's the thing is, I mean, people are wanting to unplug. They're craving fresh air. Their bodies are craving movement. We're seeing it more and more, recognize like how much our sedentary in front of screen lifestyle is deteriorating what it feels like to be a human being.
Yeah.
And so like all of these are just bringing you kind of back home to yourself, and they're really, really simple. And a lot of times you don't have to go out of your way to do a lot of this stuff. You're just learning to be more present with what you're doing.
100%.
So this has been like, I feel like such a fun conversation. And for those of you, like, again, we were like, we'll see where this goes. And I love that we touched on, money mindset and like business development and like, again, how to be a leader from the top down, how that affects people. Like there's, I think, so much wisdom in here. So thank you so much, Lindsey, for being here. If you haven't already, you can go find her on Instagram, Lindsey_Paoli. That's Paoli. You can head to our website, lindseypaoli.com. And then we have a little goodie for you in the show notes. But other than that, is there anything else where they can find you?
I have just launched my new podcast, which is why we chatted yesterday. So be sure to listen for Shalane's episode on my new podcast, the Mind Performance Pod. You'll see that also on my Instagram page and my website as well. And we'd love to have you come listen to all our conversations.
It's funny because both if you listen to the one that I'm on her podcast and then this one, they're completely different conversations. So you're going to get totally different stuff.
Yeah, so much. This has been awesome. I always have such a great time chatting with you. And so, like I said, no matter what direction this went, it would be really valuable for your listeners.
Yeah, a little bit of something in every episode for everybody, And so thank you so much, Lindsay. Until next time, everybody, cheers.